Welcome to HOA Checkmate. Keep your phone ready for this one. I am standing in my side yard in Duluth, Minnesota, holding a tape measure and a stack of contractor invoices. And Nancy White is screaming at me from 3 feet away that my fence is illegal, and she is going to make me tear it down today. She is the self-appointed compliance officer for the Harbor Pointe Community Association, and she showed up the moment my contractor pulled into the driveway this morning at 8:45. She is wearing a pink blazer and a blue visor, and she has dragged a portable folding sign stand into my yard that says "Violation in Progress" in big red letters. She is holding a clipboard and waving it at me like it is a court order. "You do not build to my standard, you pay to my standard," she shouts, her face red and furious. "This fence is 3 inches over the setback line and you never submitted a contractor approval form. I am issuing a stop work order right now, and you are going to owe the association $2,000 in fines and removal fees." I moved to Duluth 6 months ago because I needed a quiet place to recover after a long stretch of health problems. I work as a delivery driver for a logistics company, and the job is steady but exhausting. I bought a small ranch house in Harbor Pointe because it was affordable and the neighborhood looked peaceful. The HOA seemed normal at first, just basic rules about lawn care and exterior paint. But within a week of closing, I started getting notices about minor violations. A garbage can left out past 7 in the morning, a car parked in the driveway at an angle, a garden hose visible from the street. Each notice came with a threat of escalating fines if I did not comply immediately. The fence project started because my backyard had no privacy and no boundary marker. The previous owner never installed a fence, and the lot line was unclear. I hired a surveyor to mark the corners, and I filed a permit with the city. I submitted the HOA architectural approval form 2 months ago and got written confirmation that my fence plan was approved as long as it stayed inside the setback requirements. I have the email printed and sitting in my truck right now. Nancy is not interested in any of that. She claims the surveyor was wrong. The city permit does not matter, and the HOA approval I received was a mistake because she was not consulted. She insists that the fence is over the setback line by 3 inches and that the contractor is not on the approved vendor list, which makes the entire project illegal. My contractor, a quiet guy named Dave who has been building fences in Duluth for 15 years, is standing by his truck with his arms crossed. He looks uncomfortable. Nancy walked up to him earlier and told him that if he continued working on my property, she would report him to the city and make sure he never got another permit in Harbor Pointe. Dave pulled me aside and said he cannot afford the hassle. He is going to pack up and leave unless I can sort this out. I told Nancy I have the approval email and the city permit, and she waved her hand dismissively. "I do not need proof. I have paperwork and vibes," she said. That was her exact phrase, paperwork and vibes. She repeated it twice, like it was some kind of legal standard. The stakes here are personal. My health has been fragile, and sleep disruption is making it worse. I need this fence to block noise from the street and create a quiet space where I can rest without feeling exposed. The open yard has been a constant source of stress, and every delay in getting the fence finished means more sleepless nights and more anxiety. Nancy is now threatening to call the police if Dave does not leave immediately. She is claiming that my contractor is trespassing because the stop work order she just invented makes his presence illegal. Dave is shaking his head and loading his tools back into his truck. He tells me he is sorry, but he cannot risk his business over this. He drives away, and I am left standing in the yard with Nancy and her folding sign. I take out my phone and pull up the HOA approval email. I show it to Nancy, and she barely glances at it. "That was sent by the management company, not by me," she says. "I am the compliance officer, and I did not approve this. Your fence violates setback standards and the contractor policy. You are going to receive a formal violation notice today, and if you do not remove the fence within 7 days, the association will remove it for you and charge you for the labor." I ask her to show me the exact rules she is citing, and she flips through her clipboard. She points to a section that says all fences must be set back at least 6 feet from the property line. I measure the distance from the fence post to the survey stake and it is 6 feet and 2 inches. I show her the tape measure, and she shakes her head. That stake is in the wrong place, she says. The real property line is 3 inches farther in. I know because I have been living in this neighborhood for 12 years, and I have watched every fence go up. I tell her the surveyor is licensed, and the city approved the permit based on his work. She does not care. She says the HOA has its own standards, and the city permit does not override association rules. She folds up her sign stand and walks away, telling me I will get the formal notice by the end of the day. 2 hours later, a notice appears on my front door. It is printed on Harbor Pointe Community Association letterhead, and it says I missed a mandatory compliance hearing that was scheduled for yesterday at 10 in the morning. I never received any notification about a hearing. I check my email, my mail, my phone. Nothing. The notice claims I was sent a certified letter 3 weeks ago, and that my failure to appear constitutes an automatic admission of guilt. The fine is now $500, plus $200 in administrative fees for the missed hearing, plus a daily accumulation fee of $50 until the fence is removed. I call the HOA management company and ask about the hearing. The woman on the phone sounds confused. She says there was no hearing scheduled for yesterday, and that Nancy does not have the authority to issue fines without board approval. She tells me to send her a copy of the notice, and she will look into it. I scan the notice and email it to her. She calls me back 30 minutes later and says the notice is not legitimate. Nancy printed it herself using old letterhead, and she did not go through the proper channels. The management company is going to send Nancy a formal warning. But in the meantime, I should ignore the notice and continue with my fence project. I call Dave and tell him the stop work order was fake, and the management company confirmed I am allowed to finish the fence. He hesitates. He says Nancy called him after she left my house and told him that if he returns to my property, she will file a complaint with the city inspector and claim he is working without a permit. Dave already has the permit, but he does not want to deal with the hassle of proving it. He tells me he is out, and he recommends I find another contractor. I spend the next 2 days calling every fence contractor in Duluth. 3 of them tell me they will not work in Harbor Pointe because they have had problems with Nancy in the past. One guy laughs and says good luck. She put me on a blacklist and told the whole neighborhood I do shoddy work. Another contractor agrees to come out and give me a quote, but when he arrives and sees Nancy watching from across the street, he gets back in his truck and leaves without saying a word. I realize Nancy is running a targeted enforcement campaign, and I am not the only victim. I start asking around the neighborhood, and I find out that at least 4 other homeowners have had similar problems. One woman was fined for planting flowers in her front yard without submitting a landscaping plan. Another guy was threatened with a lien because his mailbox was 2 inches taller than the standard. A retired couple down the street had to repaint their house twice because Nancy claimed the color was not on the approved list, even though it was. I also find out that Nancy has been in her role as compliance officer for 3 years, and she was never officially elected or appointed. She just started calling herself the compliance officer, and the board let her do it because no one wanted to deal with her. The board president is a guy named Tom who works full-time and barely pays attention to HOA business. Nancy runs the show, and Tom signs off on whatever she tells him to sign. I decide to gather evidence. I start taking screenshots of the HOA group chat, and I find a thread from 2 months ago where Nancy and 2 other board members are discussing a plan to increase enforcement in the neighborhood. Nancy says she wants to target properties that are not up to her standards and make examples of them so other homeowners fall in line. She specifically mentions my property and says she is going to find a violation and use it to set a precedent. I also find out that Nancy filed a complaint against another homeowner last year for the exact same fence setback issue, and the board sided with the homeowner because the surveyor proved Nancy was measuring incorrectly. Nancy was told to step back and let the professionals handle property line disputes, but she ignored the directive and continued harassing homeowners over fences. I save all the screenshots and put them in a folder. I am not ready to use them yet, but I know they are going to be important later. Meanwhile, the fake violation notice is still sitting on my door, and Nancy sends me a follow-up email claiming the fine is now up to $1,000 because I have not complied. She says the HOA is preparing to file a lien on my property and that I will also be responsible for legal fees and an enforcement surcharge of $300. I forward the email to the management company, and they tell me Nancy is completely out of line. They send her a cease and desist letter and tell her she is not authorized to issue fines or liens without board approval. Nancy responds by claiming the management company does not have jurisdiction over compliance issues and that she is acting under the authority of the HOA bylaws. The management company pulls the bylaws and confirms that Nancy does not have any authority to act unilaterally. They schedule an emergency board meeting for the following week and tell me I should attend and present my case. The day before the meeting, someone moves a second violation notice onto my door. This one is printed on different paper, and it claims I was late responding to the first notice, which makes the fine double. The notice is dated 2 days ago, but I never received it. Nancy is trying to frame me as non-responsive so she can escalate the penalties. I take a photo of the notice and timestamp it. I also install a doorbell camera so I can catch Nancy if she tries to plant any more fake notices. The next morning, I check the camera footage and see Nancy walking up to my door at 6 in the morning and taping a new notice to the frame. The notice says the HOA is moving forward with a lien and that I have 24 hours to pay the accumulated fines or face foreclosure proceedings. The total amount is now $2,500, including bogus legal fees and the enforcement surcharge. I save the footage and send it to the management company. They are furious. They tell me Nancy is going to be removed from her position and that the board is going to vote on it at the meeting. If you are enjoying this HOA chaos, please hit the like button and subscribe so you do not miss the next story. That night, I meet with my ally, a city clerk named Janet, who has been helping me understand which documents are public record. Janet tells me I can request copies of all HOA enforcement actions from the past 3 years, and I can also request the board meeting minutes to see if Nancy has been acting outside her authority. I file the request and pay the small processing fee. 3 days later, I get a thick envelope from the city clerk. Inside is a stack of documents showing that Nancy has filed over 60 complaints in the past 3 years, and more than 40 of them were dismissed or overturned. The documents also show that Nancy filed 3 complaints against other homeowners for fence setbacks, and in all 3 cases, the surveyor proved Nancy was wrong. The most damaging document is a map from the city planning office that shows the setback lines for every lot in Harbor Point. According to the map, my lot is exempt from the 6-foot setback rule because it is classified as a corner lot, and corner lots only need a 4-foot setback. Nancy knew this and never told me. I now have my trump card. Nancy has been lying about the setback requirements, and I have public records proof that she knew the rule did not apply to my lot. I decide to hold the evidence until the right moment. I am not going to reveal it at the board meeting. I am going to wait until Nancy commits herself publicly, and then I am going to pull the map out and destroy her credibility in front of everyone. The emergency board meeting is scheduled for Thursday night at 7, but on Wednesday afternoon, Nancy sends an email to the entire neighborhood claiming the meeting has been moved to Tuesday at 6. She does not copy the management company or the board president. She is trying to confuse people so they show up on the wrong day and miss the real meeting. I forward the email to the management company, and they send out a clarification to everyone. The meeting is still Thursday at 7, and Nancy is being told to stop interfering with official communications. On Thursday morning, I get another email from Nancy. She says the HOA board has decided to change the fine schedule at the first of the month, and if I do not pay the current balance by tomorrow, the new schedule will apply, and my fines will increase by another $500. She is creating fake time pressure to force me into paying before the meeting. I ignore the email and focus on preparing my case. I print out the screenshots, the doorbell camera footage, the city planning map, and the public records showing Nancy's history of false complaints. I put everything in a folder, and I am ready. Thursday night, I arrive at the meeting location, which is the community center near the mailbox cluster. The room is packed. At least 20 homeowners have shown up, and most of them are people who have been targeted by Nancy in the past. Nancy is sitting at the front table with Tom, the board president, and 2 other board members. She looks smug and confident. Tom calls the meeting to order and asks me to present my case. I stand up and start by showing the HOA approval email from the management company. I explain that I followed every rule, hired a licensed surveyor, and got a city permit. I show the photos of the survey stakes and the tape measure proving the fence is inside the setback line. Nancy interrupts and says the survey is wrong, and the approval email does not count because she was not consulted. Tom looks uncomfortable and tells her to let me finish. I then show the doorbell camera footage of Nancy planting fake notices on my door. The room reacts immediately. People are whispering and pointing at Nancy. Tom asks Nancy if the footage is accurate, and she waves her hand dismissively. I was delivering official HOA correspondence, she says. That is part of my job. I then show the screenshots of the group chat where Nancy admits she is targeting my property to set a precedent. The room gets louder. One of the other homeowners stands up and says Nancy did the same thing to him last year. Another woman says Nancy threatened her contractor and forced her to stop a landscaping project. Tom is visibly upset. He tells Nancy she is out of line and that the board never authorized her to issue fines or threats. Nancy stands up and says she does not need authorization because she is the compliance officer and the bylaws give her enforcement power. Tom pulls out a copy of the bylaws and reads the relevant section out loud. It clearly states that all enforcement actions must be approved by a majority vote of the board and that fines and liens require written notice and a formal hearing. Nancy has violated every rule. I am not finished. I pull out the city planning map and hold it up. I explain that my lot is classified as a corner lot and is exempt from the 6-foot setback rule. The map shows the boundary lines clearly, and the rule does not apply. Nancy has been lying from the beginning. The room goes silent. Nancy stares at the map, and her face turns red. She opens her mouth to respond, but nothing comes out. Tom asks her if she knew about the exemption, and she hesitates. She finally says she does not trust city maps because they are always outdated and surveyors make mistakes. Tom tells her that is not an acceptable answer. He says the HOA is required to follow city regulations, and if the city says the lot is exempt, then the lot is exempt. He asks the other board members if they have any objections, and they all shake their heads. Tom then asks me if I have any other evidence, and I pull out the public records response, showing Nancy filed over 60 complaints in 3 years, and more than 40 were dismissed. I also show the records proving Nancy filed false fence complaints against 3 other homeowners and lost every time. One of the other board members, a woman named Sandra, stands up and says this is unacceptable. She says Nancy has been acting like a dictator, and the board has been enabling her by not paying attention. She moves to remove Nancy from the compliance officer position immediately and to open an investigation into all of her enforcement actions from the past 3 years. The motion is seconded, and Tom calls for a vote. All 3 board members vote yes. Nancy is removed. Nancy stands up and starts yelling. "You do not build to my standard. You pay to my standard," she shouts. This is exactly what she said to me in my yard, and hearing it again in front of the whole room makes it clear how unhinged she has been. People are shaking their heads and some are laughing. Tom tells Nancy to sit down and be quiet. He says the board is going to review all of her actions, and if they find evidence of harassment or fraud, they will refer the matter to the HOA attorney and possibly the police. Nancy grabs her portable folding sign stand and storms out of the room. On her way out, she knocks over a chair and slams the door. The room erupts in applause. Tom apologizes to me and to everyone else who was targeted by Nancy. He says the board is going to issue written reversals for all bogus fines and violations, and the HOA will reimburse any homeowners who paid penalties under false pretenses. He also says the board is going to hire a professional management company to handle all compliance issues going forward, and no single person will have unilateral enforcement power. Sandra moves to hold a special election to recall the entire board and replace them with homeowners who will actually pay attention. The motion passes unanimously. The meeting ends, and several homeowners come up to thank me for standing up to Nancy. One guy tells me Nancy tried to force him to remove a basketball hoop from his driveway and threatened to tow his car if he did not comply. Another woman says Nancy sent her a fake invoice for lawn maintenance fees that were never approved by the board. Janet, the city clerk, was in the room watching, and she comes up to tell me I did a great job. She says public records requests are powerful tools, and more people should use them to hold HOAs accountable. 2 days later, I get an official letter from the Harbor Pointe Community Association. It is a written reversal from management, with a real citation of the corner lot exemption rule. The letter confirms that my fence is fully compliant, all fines and penalties are voided, and the HOA is paying my filing fees to end the fight. The letter also includes an apology for the harassment, and a promise that the new board will implement better oversight policies. I also get a personal email from Tom. He tells me the board met privately and decided to ask Nancy to resign from the HOA entirely. They told her that if she does not step down voluntarily, they will hold a formal hearing and potentially pursue legal action for harassment and fraud. Nancy agreed to step down, and she is not allowed to hold any HOA position in the future. She cannot spin it because the written reversal is already public, and every homeowner in Harbor Pointe has a copy. The recall election happens 3 weeks later, and the entire board is replaced. The new president is Sandra, and she immediately implements a transparent complaint process with mandatory board review for all enforcement actions. She also bans anyone from calling themselves a compliance officer without a formal board vote and written job description. I hire a new contractor and finish the fence in less than a week. The fence is exactly where it is supposed to be, and it looks great. I finally have the privacy and quiet I needed, and my health is improving because I can sleep without street noise and constant stress. Nancy moved out of Harbor Pointe 2 months later. I heard from another neighbor that she tried to join the HOA board in her new neighborhood, and they rejected her application after doing a background check and finding out about her history in Harbor Pointe. The funny karma moment came a few weeks after the meeting. A neighbor fact-checked Nancy instantly during a chance encounter at the grocery store parking lot. Nancy was complaining to someone about how the HOA treated her unfairly and how she was just trying to protect property values. The neighbor, who had been at the meeting, pulled out her phone and showed Nancy the public records response and the doorbell camera footage right there in the parking lot. Nancy turned bright red and walked away without saying another word. The showdown at the grocery store parking lot was the final punctuation mark on the whole disaster. Nancy tried to control the narrative one more time, and it backfired immediately. The special meeting turned into a recall vote, resignations cascaded, and new leadership took over before the next project got targeted. The entire power structure of the Harbor Pointe HOA was rebuilt in less than 2 months, and it happened because Nancy overplayed her hand, and I had the receipts to prove it. I still live in Harbor Pointe, and the neighborhood is completely different now. The new board is transparent, responsive, and reasonable. Enforcement actions are rare and always justified. The mailbox cluster is still the unofficial courtroom, but now it is a place where people chat and help each other, instead of gossiping about violations. I took the fine notice without flinching, because I knew what it would trigger. I knew Nancy would escalate, and I knew she would make mistakes. Every fake notice, every threatening email, every lie was another piece of evidence I could use against her. I requested an emergency hearing and presented the evidence in the courthouse hallway at the last second, right before the board meeting started. I handed the folder to Tom and told him he needed to see it before Nancy said another word. He read through it in 5 minutes, and his face went pale. That was the moment I knew I had won. The fence is still standing, and it is exactly where it is supposed to be. The survey stakes are still in the ground, marking the corners. Nancy tried to erase the truth, but the map does not lie. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.